So which one was it? You can go to the next slide, Craig. We looked in some ways when we started to think about, well, how does our labor issue relate to these things? It was easiest for us to decide what wasn't the weak link. So it was clear that money conversion or marketing wasn't really an issue. We have a really loyal and diverse customer base in supporting the farm, and we have hundreds of restaurants and thousands of potential customers nearby with Portland, and there's an increasing demand for local meat. So we really have access to abundant markets, and in addition, we had just spent some time updating our online presence with a new website and a new logo. That's our rosier pig there. And so we really were able to sell what we could feasibly grow and raise, and that wasn't a roadblock. So sometimes determining what isn't your weak link is a little bit easier than determining what is. But that left two more buckets, which on the next slide we thought about resource conversion. And we took a closer look at that, and we certainly didn't feel like we lacked sufficient raw resources. I mean, we have a really abundant land. We have great soil fertility. We have adequate capitalization and good equipment to seed and grow our healthy plants. So we didn't really feel like we were experiencing any negative symptoms during this resource conversion phase. Especially, we kind of look at it in terms of where that is in the calendar year. You know, early on in the season, labor really wasn't a pain point in terms of getting things seeded or transplanted out. But we really, you know, when we started to think about, well, is it resource or is it product conversion is where our weak link is, we realized quickly we had to get serious to understand what the full problem was we were trying to address. And we had multiple discussions over the course of a few days in an effort to kind of understand. And what we came away with was we started just to list some of the symptoms we were having, because we said, well, we think labor is the issue, but is it really? And so, you know, some of the symptoms and things that we jotted down were these feelings of, you know, the out of control feeling that you're spending time putting out fires rather than preventing them, or that feeling that at certain points in the season there's things that are undone or unfinished, you know, unkempt or uncared for. And then you know, we had these, which usually culminated at a point in the season, which we felt like that feeling where things are not very fun is maybe tied to our weak link. And that was just the stress of at the peak of our harvest season, that there was more than anybody could possibly do. And that led us to start to think about, well, maybe it's overproduction or inefficient production and not necessarily labor, because it's you know, it's easy to just jump to, oh, well, let's just add more labor. But when we started to really think about our symptoms, we thought, you know, that overproduction or inefficiently producing what we have might be part of the issue. So after looking at all those symptoms, we kind of said, well, you know, I don't really think it's resource conversion. I think it might be product conversion, because our pain point is really at that peak of August and September when we've got just way too much happening and we feel like we don't have enough labor. So we looked at the holistic financial planning descriptions of product conversion and the capacity to convert raw resources into marketable form, or the one that really struck us, which are the resources being left to, quote, rot on the vine. And I have this picture of our two little pigs, and I like that picture because it's part in terms of what I think is really that, you know, having time to scratch your little pig's back on a regular basis is kind of an integral part of our product conversion, because contented pigs make for great pork. So, you know, that was kind of where we said we're having all these symptoms, but then this is the kind of thing we want time in our day to do, to scratch our pig's backs. So we, you know, like I said, we reviewed our symptoms and we delved deeper, and we weren't, you know, it was clear to us like the major pain point really was at that peak of the season. We weren't keeping up on our pruning and training of our tomatoes. We struggled to keep ahead of some of the weeding issues. We had to cut the season short on some of our crops, like summer squash, just because we couldn't maintain the harvest schedule, the ruling harvest schedule every 36 hours. And so we started to realize we did have a product conversion weak link, and our production practices really had some gross inefficiencies. And that really was a moment, an aha moment, because we realized employees won't necessarily solve that problem. You can, like Craig mentioned before, sometimes profits can mask damaging side effects or side effects that keep you from really discovering what, for instance, our weak link was. And so we were able to, when we had employees, throw more bodies at task, so to speak, and come out at the end of the year okay, but it was covering up a lot of the inefficiencies we had in our own production practices. So we really said we don't have a labor-related weak link in product conversion. We just have an inefficiency weak link. And so we really decided to focus on balancing our scale of production with the scale of our labor and infrastructures available to us. And once we identified that product conversion weak link, a lot of things just fell into place. In light of our findings, like I said, we understood that hiring help wouldn't really, it would honestly just mask our problem instead of solving it, because we needed to get more efficient at what we were doing. So instead of growing more crops and putting out more beds or half acres of certain vegetables, we wanted to grow less and grow them more efficiently. And if we could gain efficiency through these better production practices, then our energy and our money would more align with our holistic context, which for us, again, was, we're talking about strengthening family relationships and independent time wealth, which I identify really, or I describe really around being able to manage and control when and how you're spending your time. And so by contrast, for us, paying employees didn't really lead toward energy or money going in the direction we wanted to. So now that we understood the difference between expanding an operation and growing an operation, and that was really critical for us, was to decide personally, we really didn't want to or didn't enjoy hiring and managing employees, so how could we get more efficient instead of get big? And that's what we ended up doing. So you will see on the next slide, so that we made that decision to not rehire in 2012, and so 2013 was the first year that we managed the farm solely, Brad and myself, full-time. And we saved about $15,000 a year in payroll expenses and actual labor costs. And instead of that, here's kind of a list of some of the things we decided to do. We went to some more mechanization. So instead of individually crawling down 160-foot beds every other day to transplant things, we invested in a water wheel transplanter, and we invested in an electric conversion for our field harvester, which is a horizontal tool that you operate with your feet, and we made it electric so that it was very quiet, so therefore we would be inclined to spend more time on it and use it. We added a basket weeder to our we have Alice Chalmers tractor, so we bought a basket weeder so we could do a lot of mechanized weeding instead of hand weeding. And then we did some, so those three things up top were, they had probably a couple $1,000 price range on each of them. But then we did some things that we wouldn't have thought to do if we hadn't gone through addressing our weak link. And that is, we did some really simple things that made a huge difference, like mechanizing our row marking system. So it was as simple as putting welding 3 bolts in the back of our tiller so that we have very evenly spaced rows that make weeding and subsequent harvesting much easier, instead of having them kind of off kilter or wonky where you would have to do everything by hand. And we also standardized our bed and row system so that we only grow crops on certain, 1, 2, or 3 rows per bed, and that's it. And that really just helps simplify things and therefore make us more efficient. Neither of those, I think it's important to note, cost us $10 really. It was more just a matter of having the payback for efficient operation and things that made our quality of life better on a day-to-day basis. So in addition to all those, we were able to give ourselves a raise to $20 an hour, which is pretty significant given that, like I said, this is our only source of income. And so overall, this has been just a really successful transition for us, and I think we would have had a real difficult time making that decision without having the tools of the weak link to really evaluate and to dig a little bit deeper than you normally would, because the trigger, the reaction always is you need more labor, you need more labor. Well, it might have been, except if you might have made that decision. We would have probably made that decision if we hadn't had that holistic context really to bounce back to and say, well, what is going to make for a happier life for us and a better quality life? On the next page, you'll see that we had a successful 2013 without employees, and I say load off our shoulders because they're really, what I mean was that it's funny that that stress, you don't realize that the stress of managing employees, at least for me, was very real, and not having it was kind of, it was very telling that it wasn't so much drudgery some days as it had been. So it's ironic because you would think no employees, now you're stuck doing everything yourself, but it actually was a load off of our shoulders. And our net profit increased 4.6%, which is pretty fantastic. The challenges are twofold. One is that we have to be extremely diligent about where we are spending our limited time because we don't have that much. So that's a gift and a challenge because you can't do as many things, but you're also really cognizant always of, am I spending my time where I should be spending to get the best return and to be efficient and therefore have a healthy, productive day. So at the end of this 2013, we spent some time doing our annual review and followed the process Craig talked about a little bit before, and we realized that we still have a lot of efficiencies that we could be gained and we could improve on because we had such a successful year. We don't intend to hire employees in 2014, but we also felt like because we're serving 3 markets now, that's pretty taxing. We're trying to sell to a natural foods grocer chain in Portland, which is 12 stores now turning into 13, 14, 15 that keep growing. And then we have several restaurants that we have accounts with that we're selling to every single week and sometimes delivering 2 or 3 times a week. And then we have, our 60 families that come to the farm every week to pick up their CSA shares and or to purchase heritage pork. And so for the coming year, we really, going through our holistic planning and thinking about our, revising our context a little more and thinking about things, we really came to the conclusion that we needed to focus on, maybe reducing a market. And if we decided to drop one, then which one would that be and how do you go about making that decision? And that's where we really tackled the gross profit analysis, which on the next page, Craig, you can see, thank you, that we needed to decide, well, which one is least profitable, and then we could really look at that in terms of the overall holistic context and decide, well, is that still, is that still how we feel about it, given the social and other factors involved in not selling to that market. And so we said, okay, well, we need to run our numbers on all 3 of these different markets, our restaurants, our wholesale, and our CSA, and decide which one we really needs the most.